Hi, EDU 200 students. Welcome to the Chapter 10 video lecture on curriculum standards and testing. Curriculum standards and testing are all huge topics in our education system, especially right now. Throughout this presentation, if you see any blue text, those are considered notes that you should be jotting down as you go through this video. Feel free to pause this video whenever you need and continue it when you're ready. Let's get started. Curriculum. So first of all, the word curriculum actually comes from a Latin word meaning racetrack. So you have to think of curriculum as the guide or the track that students are going along. It's typically a set of courses and their content offered at a school or university. Formal or explicit curriculum are the classroom experiences of learning. These would include specific lesson plans, curriculum guides, or learning units. Invisible curriculum, or hidden curriculum, is unintended learning that emerges as students are shaped by the school culture. So, an example of this would be if a teacher is doing a spelling game in the classroom, yes, they could be practicing those spelling words. However, they're also understanding the importance of winning the game or the pain of losing the game. Null curriculum is a topic that's never taught as it is unimportant or maybe too controversial or inappropriate or not worth the time. An example of this would be if your history class never went beyond World War II, then the history of the Korean, Vietnam, Gulf Wars, along with civil rights and women's rights movement, may have been considered null curriculum. Throughout this lecture, you'll see 5 parts of your lecture assignment, and here is part 1. So, talking about the hidden curriculum, what else did you learn in school at these different levels? Now, remember, hidden curriculum is not the actual lessons written down, but maybe still the lessons that you learned throughout elementary, middle, and high school. Extracurriculum includes activities and places where a great deal of learning occurs without tests or grades. Example of this would be sports, clubs, governance, or maybe the student newspaper. The textbook also gives a stat that high school seniors are less likely to cut class when they're involved in these extracurricular activities, and they're also 3 times more likely to have a GPA, sorry, it's GPS, a GPA of 3.0 or higher. So we can see that these extracurricular activities are really beneficial to students. So just a question for you to ponder. Do all students have the same opportunity to benefit from from participating in these extracurricular activities? So just thinking of different high schools that you know, do they all offer the same thing? Are there any rules or stipulations in order to participate in these activities? So just think about the opportunities for all students. So again, the importance of extracurricular activities can be seen to enrich student life and learning, higher student self-esteem, school completion and civic participation, improved race relations, higher SAT scores and grades, better health and less conformity to gender stereotypes, and a higher career aspiration, especially for boys from poor backgrounds. So, all of these are extremely great benefits for students when they're able to participate in extracurricular activities. Let's talk about shaping their curriculum. Okay, so here we have a picture of a pressure cooker, and our students are actually the ones on top. All of these influences, all of these entities have an influence on curriculum. So, federal government, standardized tests, education committees, communities, parents, special interest groups, and students, along with teachers, college and universities, administrators, state government, local government, professional organizations, and then, of course, the publishers. So, we're thinking of all of these entities have influence over school curriculum. Why do they care so much about school curriculum? Maybe you've heard of the saying, you are what you eat. Well, it kind of comes true when you talk about curriculum. You are what you learn. So, who and what shape the curriculum? We have this long list on the left hand side of those entities creating the pressure in the pressure cooker. And this is now part 2 of your lecture assignment. So, in your textbook on page 287 and 288, for each listed party, you will see a short explanation of how they shape the curriculum. Your job is to choose 3 of these and give a description of the examples of how they shape the curriculum. Let's now talk about the textbooks. A couple stats before we look at how textbooks are adopted. So 95% of classroom time is used with textbooks. Teachers base 70% of instructional decisions based on the textbook, and 90% of homework assignments come from the textbook. So obviously they have a huge impact in our schools today. So let's look at a difference between if a teacher gets to choose a textbook or if it comes from a state approved list. This map shows the blue are the states where there has to be a state approved list of adopted textbooks. The yellow shows the states where teachers or districts can make the decision on what textbooks will be used. Looking at this map, this now is part 3 of your lecture assignment. You're going to answer the following 2 questions. So what patterns do you notice in most of the states that require text to be selected from an approved list? Is this information a factor in where you might teach? Okay, so a short response to those looking at this image. Within textbooks, they can hold biases, and it's important to know and understand those biases so that you can help your students become critical readers. Let's look at 7 types of biases: invisibility, stereotyping, imbalance and selectivity, unreality, fragmentation and isolation, linguistics bias, and cosmetic bias. So here is part 4. On page 292, you'll see the 7 types, 7 types or 7 forms. Your job is to give one short example of each of these. So the No Child Left Behind Act beginning intention was to identify those schools that were underperforming, and so parents would know the schools that were doing better and not, and they would have the choice to be able to move their child to a better performing school. So that's how it started. However, it really did create a culture of testing. There is annual testing in reading and math and science every year. And then these tests were done in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. And report cards were given to states and the school districts to show those underperforming schools and those were closed. So those underperforming schools were being shown as a failure. Now, the funds from these failing schools were then funneled into educational reform initiatives, which provided kind of a segue to charter schools. Charter schools, again, can be non or for profit schools. However, at this time, there was no evidence to show that this new reform or charters were doing anything better than those quote unquote failing schools. Common Core. So the beginning of Common Core really started with the inconsistency and rigor across the United States and all of the different school districts in each state. And so the data from the inconsistency came from the high school exit exams. And after just a couple years of doing those exit exams, some questions came about. So one was, why did almost every student in Mississippi pass the state mathematics exam on the first attempt, while 35% of students in Arizona failed the test? So there was little consistency on student performance from state to state, which is a situation that was found unprofessional and embarrassing. Thus created the need for a single set of standards and a common grading criteria. This became known as the Common Core State Standards and referred to now as the Common Core. So there's some concerns about the Common Core. Is there consensus on a single set of common standards or core standards for all states? Are these standards the best? Are all states on board? Do standards reflect an appropriate direction for the schools? Is there a single set of Common Core standards desirable? We know that other countries use a set of Common Core standards. Are ours matching up to those? Are Common Core standards the right direction for American schools? What will testing be like for these standards? So we've been doing a Common Core standards for a couple of years now, and we do know that the testing is extremely difficult for students due to the implementation of the Common Core. This is where we come to part 5 of your lecture assignment. On page 294, you will find the section titled You Be the Judge, a Common Core of Standards. Your job for that one is to read the 2 opinions of the Common Core and answer the reflection question. So, reasons why standardized tests are not working. We know a lot of these. Poorer students are at greater risk. Lower graduation rates, higher test scores do not mean more learning. Standardized testing shrinks curriculum, time for curriculum essentially, and tests may be flawed. Teachers face a lot of stress. There's no clarity on subjects to be taught in the classroom. This picture was drawn by a teacher to reflect the teacher stress. To explain it a little bit, we have a teacher who's wearing a pink dress and the state representative. The teacher is saying, sorry kids, move back to straight rows because there's no more creative teaching. And the reason why she's having to say that is because the person in green is the state representative saying that there's no fun allowed and you will teach to the test. Okay? The students are in rows and they just want to know why. Why is school so daunting and there's little time for creativity and fun? So, evaluating teachers by student test scores. We know that this is a flawed approach. It's an imperfect value added concept. And value added means that, well, it's the idea that students can be tested from year to year to measure their own annual educational growth. Many districts are using these year to year test results, this added value, to evaluate teacher skills. So find the teacher adding the most value and the least amount of value to students' education, and bingo, you can determine which teachers to award and which to penalize. How does that concept sound to you? Definitely flawed. So, one test score is an inadequate measure of student growth. Student achievement is influenced by a lot of things. So, health issues in home life, the class size, the materials, attendance, other teachers, peers, and parenting at home, wealth or poverty of a student, and the school. All of these things are not controlled by teachers. So, we know that all of these factors contribute to student testing scores, which puts a lot of responsibility on the teacher for things that they cannot control. Campbell's Law. Donald T. Campbell is a social scientist, and he wrote, the more any quantitative social indicator is used for social decision making, the more subject it will be to corruption pressures, the more apt it will be to be distorted and corrupt in the social processes it was intended to monitor. So the more we try to put numbers on people, the more corruption is possible. Authentic assessment, something you really should hold close to your heart, is because it actually captures student performance. Encourage a student to reflect on their own work, self-monitor, and integrate it into the student's whole learning process. So, authentic assessment. So, this slide shows a graph with the answers of do you believe in evolution? Well, in colonial New England, the Bible was a major text and religious instruction was the center of curriculum. However, our new country was formed and the Constitution changed all of that. The First Amendment does not allow public schools to promote religion. So we have this graph here and we have the different countries: Sweden, France, Japan, Switzerland, United States, and Turkey. And the question again is, do you believe in evolution? Are these numbers surprising to you? Why do you think that the percentage of Americans who believe in evolution is so much lower than many other countries? So, just an idea for you to think about. Now, let's talk about censorship. No matter what content is found in a particular textbook, of course, of any kind of study, someone is likely to consider it too conservative or too liberal, too traditional, etc. When this happens, pressure to censor the offending materials soon follows. So we're going to look at two slides here, comprised of the list of material that was censored at one time or another. So we have an author, Mary Rogers, the first one. The book is called Freaky Friday. Here's the comment on it. It makes fun of parents and parental responsibility. So it was censored. Plato, we have the comment that it was unchristian. Around the World in 80 Days, unfavorable to Mormons. We have Macbeth was too violent for children. Crime and Punishment serves as a poor model for young people. Moby Dick, comment was contains homosexuality. Anne Frank, Diary of a Young Girl, was commented as obscene and blasphemous. Charlotte's Web was a morbid picture of death. The Hobbit, subversive elements. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was seen as racist. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, racism, insensitivity, and offensive language. And then the Webster's Dictionary contains sexually explicit definitions. So it's important for you to understand the materials that you are using can be seen extreme in whatever way, and you have to use your professional judgment for those types of materials. Students using computers at home. Here's a think about it before we look at these data points. So, how has technology affected curriculum and student learning in the past 10 years? I'm sure you're thinking right now, it's changed it greatly. Memorizing information is really not that important anymore because you have all the information at your fingertips. Now it's more about what you do with the information, right? Okay, let's look at which students really have this advantage at home. So here's showing some race and ethnicity data points and also some income data points for students who are actually getting to use computers at home. With this high of impact on knowledge as a whole, we need to think about the digital divide that's happening throughout the world and definitely across our country. The digital divide is the gap between those who have access and those who do not have access to technology and the internet. The video we watched on Friday examined the effect of having access to technology and the power that is given to those who are granted that access. Leveling the playing field is what was mentioned. So I want to leave you in this presentation with the kind of quote that's stated at the very end of the chapter, and it's titled Students on My Mind. One of the things that has been most important to me in my daily work is to remember that I'm not teaching a subject, but that I'm teaching students. In these days of standards, clearly defined and often prescribed teaching objectives, it is hard to remember sometimes that the most important thing isn't the standard, it's the student. When I remember this, it calls me to use skills that aren't always written in my lesson plan. I have to be open-minded in my approach to students, remembering that their knowledge, experiences, and concerns are not what I might expect or predict. Remembering to teach the student. I also call on my gifts of humor, patience, and creativity. While these are not written in any of my daily lesson plans, they are critical to reaching students that I teach in authentic and transforming ways. Thanks for watching.